Okay, hello, welcome back. Slides are loading, excellent. So I'm still here in South Africa recording down here at the very tip of South Africa. In the other slides on teacher rights, teacher firing, you saw I was closer to the stream, tried to get a little further away and provide just another spectacular view. It's sunset here in the mountains. You can just see where it's still touching the very tops of the mountains up there with where the clouds are. I have to say I am pretty much in love with Stellenbosch. So, all right, let's talk discrimination in employment. Now, when we talked earlier about discrimination, when we talked student discrimination, remember we talked about protected classes and having to fall into one of those protected classes. And here you can see when it comes to employment issues, a bunch of those protected classes laid out that are likely to impact us in schooling. You can see that Title VII protects race, national origin, religion, sort of the protected classes that we're used to seeing. When it comes to sex and gender issues, you can see not only does Title VII protect, but also the Equal Pay Act. We'll talk about that in a minute. There is a whole additional law on age discrimination, which we'll talk about. And then there are also additional laws on disability discrimination. Let's dive into those, remembering that when we have a protected class, there must be a compelling interest and then narrow tailoring of a particular employment policy to have as little impact as possible on one of these protected classes. So if we're talking about terminating a teacher on the basis of one of these issues, and sometimes we might, maybe on an issue of disability. Maybe you are in a Catholic school and it's on an issue of religion. These things do come up from time to time, and so if we're going to take action against a teacher in a protected class, then we really have to know what we're doing. All right, so let's look at some of the laws that help protect teachers and provide guidance to you as future employers about what kinds of things you should be thinking about to make sure that you're treating your teachers fairly. All right, so first off, when do we allow discrimination in our employment practices? We certainly do discriminate in our employment practices. And so when we are actively discriminating against a protected class, then there must be that compelling interest in narrow tailoring. But we have guidance from the courts, from the Supreme Court, on what it takes to meet that standard. And what it takes is that the protected class, being a member of the protected class, has to be a bona fide occupational qualification, okay? So a member of a particular class is necessary for the normal operation of that position, and that position is not something that is discriminatory in its very nature. All right, so what are some bona fide occupational qualifications? Well, if you want to be a principal of a Catholic school in the future, you might need to be Catholic. And the same goes for other religious schools, okay? For instance, to teach girls PE, we want to hire a girls teacher to supervise the locker room when students are getting ready, all right? So that's fine. We're going to discriminate on gender in that particular position because it's a bona fide occupational qualification. For instance, if you've ever worked for UPS in Louisville or messed with that, you'll know that they have minimum restrictions in terms of the amount of weight that it is necessary to lift. All right? That is also considered a bona fide occupational qualification to move those packages around. And we do it all the time. Perhaps in our administrative position, we might require a certain number of words per minute, which might discriminate on the basis of disability. These are what we can consider bona fide occupational qualifications. These are legitimate reasons for discriminating against a protected class. However, let me say that you don't take this too far. All right, these things are usually very clear in and of themselves, such as a female teacher for the girls' locker room. Don't sort of import a bona fide occupational qualification. Don't make them up just to try to limit your potential pool of applicants. All right, now let's dive into a few of these laws in particular. We passed the Age Discrimination in Employment Act several years ago, where because older voters vote we put in additional protections for them. So anyone that is over 40 has an additional layer of protection. Now, when this comes to schools, this is a huge statute that it applies to schools. Think about what's going on. The salary schedules mandate that additional years of experience lead to additional pay for a teacher. All right, so if you have a teacher that's over 40, 52 years old, for instance, they're probably pretty far down the salary schedule. All right, and they might be over. They might already have their master's or their doctorate or whatever. Great. That teacher might be twice the price of hiring a brand new teacher straight out of college. And so there's a lot of incentive, economic incentive, built into the system to hire the younger teacher. This is awesome. There's spectacular birds flying and running around everywhere. Awesome. There's like some guineas down on the ground. It's awesome. So there's a lot of incentive to hire the younger teacher in the education system. This law tries to stop that and says, hey, it does not matter those economic reasons. You need to put age aside and hire only on the basis of qualifications. The teacher that has many more years of experience is likely to be more qualified. They have much more experience. And so this is something you really need to keep your eye on. And if you are going to hire a younger teacher, if two very equal candidates are in your pool and you are going to hire the younger teacher, you need to make sure you have very clear rationale for what additional qualifications or what additional things that younger teacher brought to the table that got them the job over the older teacher. All right, don't forget about this one. We do it all the time in education. Now, disability discrimination. All right, this takes a few different forms, and what we have at stake here are the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Keep in mind, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, our main disability statute when it comes to kids, does not apply here. But our typical 504 and ADA language of substantially limiting a major life activity is what applies here. And so disability discrimination is not necessarily a physical disability. It could be a temporary disability. For instance, there's geese everywhere. It's spectacular. And we're actually getting a spectacular sunset also. Oh, okay, I'm in love with it. I know I need to focus. Now, if you conclude there is a disability, and you're going to have your HR office involved, you might even have your legal counsel involved, but if there is a substantial limitation to one or more major life activities, and a teacher can document that, then the school needs to make reasonable accommodations in order to permit that teacher to effectively carry out their job. Okay? So that might be, if a teacher, for instance, has surgery and can't lift anything, that reasonable accommodation might be that you need to assign a kid to go with that teacher to carry stuff everywhere that teacher goes. All right? That is a super reasonable accommodation for a limitation of a major life activity. All right, that's the kind of stuff you're probably going to be facing in schools on a regular basis, and most of the time you just need to accommodate those teachers. All right? Now, once in a while, accommodating a teacher is going to truly be an undue hardship on the school. It's going to cost a tremendous amount of money, or it's going to be tremendously disruptive to the school to have a teacher participate in the building. Now, in those instances, that is a way out of the 504 and the ADA rules here that permits the teacher, that permits the school then to proceed with a termination or some other particular action that you're going to take against the teacher, but only if it is truly a large undue hardship. Okay, now let's turn to gender discrimination. Now, of course, gender discrimination is protected under Title VII, and you're going to bring cases under Title VII in those instances. Okay, there's some clear procedures about moving parties, and of course, that's all that's going on here. But in addition to all of that, you have the Equal Pay Act working here. So the Equal Pay Act is pretty clear. It sort of does what it says in that it requires that people that do equal work on jobs which require equal skill, effort, and responsibility, performed under similar conditions, must be equally paid. All right, now I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Like, wait a minute. I'm not going to have to deal with this as a principal because my teachers are on a salary schedule and everyone is fixed on what they get paid. True. But that's not the only time that we pay teachers in schools. All right, we also pay teachers when it comes to extracurricular activities. We pay teachers different rates when it goes into the administrative positions for being a dean or taking on principalship duties. There are differences in pay. And I also must comment here that we in education have some challenges when it comes to the Equal Pay Act. Think about the basketball team. If you are the boys basketball coach and you are the girls basketball coach, that might be a man coaching the boys and a woman coaching the girls. They might be paid different rates. Now, many districts have tried to equalize these things over time, but there are still some districts that are paying essentially the exact same task, coach basketball, still paying them different rates. That is likely a violation of the Equal Pay Act, and if a case is not brought, then it's fine. But once a case is brought in a particular district, you're probably likely to have to level those things out and look at all the different ways that we're compensating teachers and make sure that we are being equal in how we compensate. Okay, last one here. Because this applies to schools quite a bit, again, we have a lot of female teachers in schools. There's a lot of babies happening in schools on a pretty regular basis. That's fine. That is awesome. But as a principal, it is going to be a little bit disruptive to your life. All right? Prior to the 1970s, we allowed schools to discriminate on the basis of pregnancy. But now we have a Pregnancy Discrimination Act which specifically forbids you to discriminate on the basis of pregnancy. The teacher is entitled to their job back. The teacher is entitled to leave under the Family Medical Leave Act. So there are specific provisions now protecting pregnancy, and you as school administrators just need to deal with the disruption. Find a long-term sub that can cover, that you trust, that you like. You always need to have a list of long-term subs in your back pocket that can help cover some time for you. Even work with the teacher before the leave happens to make sure that they're well prepared for students to keep working beyond during the pregnancy. All right? It's just something that you need to make sure you're dealing with and that we're not discriminating on the basis of. And even these days too, even for men, there are also protections in those medical leave acts that protect men and give men some time to be on leave as well. There's a lot going on in here, a lot of potential ways to discriminate in employment. I just wanted to give you an overview, show you some of the big areas, make sure some of these things are in your mind. When you get the job, there'll be some training, hopefully within the district. Discrimination in hiring practices in particular can be a big problem. And we'll talk more about this in the personnel course, but when you're conducting interviews, you need to be very cautious what kinds of questions are being asked. A question of, so where do you go to church? Not permissible. A question of, how many kids do you have? Not permissible. There's a lot of potential room for discrimination in employment with principals, so you just need to be aware of these areas, be thinking about what is off limits at all times, and try and stay away from those areas. All right, from South Africa, bye-bye.